three essential attributes of a true disciple. And the first attribute of a true disciple is fidelity. Fidelity. The second attribute that we'll see here of a true disciple is teachability. And the third attribute of a true disciple is changeability. First of all, fidelity. Jesus called his disciples and he didn't say, "Come, believe in me." He said, "Come, follow me." That's a very important thing. And some people will say, well, that's salvation by works, isn't it? If you have to follow Jesus to be saved, that is salvation by works. Surely we just have to believe in him. And that's true. It's only by believing that we are saved. We believe that a Christian is saved by grace through faith. By grace, or put another way, by grace alone, through faith alone. But that word faith is the Greek word pistis. And pistis means a few different things, but before we get there, let's explain something. Faith is itself a gift. Faith is itself a gift. It says in Romans chapter 10, in around verse 17, that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the message of Christ. Faith comes when you hear the message and you find yourself believing. I didn't work up to believing in Jesus. I mean, I didn't study. I didn't say, I need to believe in Jesus. I need to exercise some gray matter to produce the believing. I didn't go to university to discover how to believe in Jesus. At some point, someone preached. Maybe I heard someone preach several times. Maybe I heard someone share several times. But something began to get a hold of me. Something began to grow in me, and I found myself believing. Faith is not a work. Faith is always a gift. But once you get it, two things happen. One, you trust. That's what most people think of faith as. They think of faith as trusting, believing in something or someone. But the other part of this Greek word pistis, or faith, is fidelity. The closest thing in English we have is faithfulness. Fidelity. And so out of this faith that we receive when we come to salvation, out of this faith that we receive, we not only trust him, but we desire him. We not only trust him, but we desire him. Disciples believe that Jesus is worthy and desirable in and of himself. You see, we read last week, didn't we, that when Jesus was at the foot of the mountain, he saw the crowd. And then when he went up the mountain, his disciples came to him out of the crowd. And so amidst the crowd, you had many different types of people, and every one of them was following. They were all following. That's how they got there. They didn't just sprout up out of the ground. They arrived at the foot of the mountain because they followed Jesus. But some of them were following, but they were not following. Because there were the disciples, and then there were the rest of the crowd. Some of the crowd were there because they realized that Jesus sometimes also laid on catering. They realized that sometimes Jesus was in the habit of miraculously producing food. People sometimes come to church for that reason, don't they? Have you noticed that when there's food, things are a little different sometimes? And so people came because maybe there was food. Maybe some people came because there were miracles. They had a friend who was healed, and they wanted healing too. And so they came because of the miracles. Other people came just because of the spectacle. We were driving back. I can't remember where we were driving. Oh, we were driving back from East Grinstead the other week from the wedding, and suddenly all the traffic traffic slowed down as we were driving back, and we couldn't understand why. It was because there was a terrible accident, and of course everyone wanted to slow down and have a good look at the carnage. Some people were following the spectacle. They'd heard about this. They had no TV, they had no Netflix, so why not? They followed to see the spectacle of Jesus there at the foot of the mountain. But that's not the kind of following that faith brings. The kind of following that faith brings is not following food. It is not following the spectacle. It's not even following the healing, but it is following the person. It is that sense that you get when you are born again, when you get saved, that Jesus is lovely and desirable in and of himself, and you find yourself longing to get closer to him. Fidelity, faithfulness, desiring after him. These are all qualities of the true disciple. There are all these other types of followers, but the true disciple has a heart for Jesus himself. Matthew 4:22, of course, he said to them, "Come, follow me," and they left their boats. There was something about Jesus that was more desirable than their business, and they were willing to leave it behind. Jesus says in Matthew 16:24-26, he talks about, if you want to come after me, then you need to take up your cross and follow me. And then shockingly, it says in Luke 14, around verse 27, that unless you take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. He doesn't say you cannot be my disciple if when you pray for people, they don't get instantly healed. He doesn't say that you can't be my disciple unless you have a degree in theology. He doesn't say you can't be my disciple for any other reason. He just says, unless you take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. That's challenging, isn't it? That's very challenging to us. Because so often we're sold a very different reason for coming to Jesus. Why would we do that? Why would we do that? Jesus even goes as far in verse 28, immediately after he says, you cannot be my disciples unless you take up your cross and follow me. He even goes as far as saying, you better count the cost. Now, I've been an evangelist and now I'm a pastor, and it's always very tempting to get that unique selling point in place when you're preaching the gospel. You want people to respond, and so you try and sell it as best you can. But Jesus said, count the cost. He said, count the cost. Imagine if you went into PC World or whatever it is to buy yourself a television, and the salesman said to you, well, it's very expensive. Are you sure? He's not going to say that. He's going to show you all the payment plans. He's going to tell you how easy it is, how amazing this television is. But Jesus says, count the cost. With all of that, that young man asked to follow him, and he said, foxes have holes and birds have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. With all of that, why? That young man left. He gave up, didn't he? Another person said, let me first go and bury my father. And he said, let the dead bury their own dead. And he didn't follow him. Why, with all of those discouragements, would we follow him? It's because of this fidelity that comes when we receive faith as a believer. It tells us that there is something desirable about Jesus, knowing him in and of himself. God, I was going to say Jesus, but the Lord said to Abraham, I am your shield, I am your very great reward. Isn't that interesting? God himself was the reward. And there is something about Jesus to the believer that stands out. That is a mark of a true disciple. It's a desire for Jesus himself. That might be challenging one or two people right now. Why are you in church? Why are you a Christian? Why do you pray? What is it all about? What is the desire of your heart? Well, the desire of the heart of a true disciple, not that we don't want those things, not that we don't need food, not that we don't need clothing, not that we don't need physical things, but that the core desire of our heart is to know Jesus. And then when the waters get rough, when things aren't working out, because we were saying last week, the question we were asking last week is, why does it feel like Christianity is not working for me? Why is faith not doing what it's supposed to do? Those tough questions. When we get to those tough times, we don't abandon ship because there's something we still want, even if we can't have those other things, and that is Jesus. I've been married for many years. I've been married for 22 years, and we've been through our ups and downs. We've been through good times. We've been through bad times. In the bad times, we still stick together. Yeah? Or did some of you choke at that part where they say, for good times and bad, for better or for worse? It's for worse. Why would you stick at it for worse? Because we're not in it just for the good times, we're in it for each other. And that's the mark of a true disciple, is there is a desire for the person, or they used to say the hand of God and not just the face of God, right? That's the first mark of a true disciple. And we're not just preparing for something in the future. We're not just preparing for something that's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years or 100 years or 1,000 years when Jesus comes back. But we are on board now. We are on board now. We are not just waiting for the kingdom to come. We are the ones bringing it. We're not just in it to wait for the good times, but we're in it to fight the good fight. Paul did not say at the end of his life, I have run the race, I have lived my best life now. He said, I have run the race, I have fought the good fight. We are the advance party that is here to bring in the kingdom of God upon the earth. We are part of that. First mark of a true disciple, fidelity, faithfulness.